Hello, hello, hello. Today I am so excited. We're starting a verse-by-verse study on Ruth, a story all about God's faithfulness and how God will always provide for us. And so, just for a bit of background, we see in verse 1, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab." So this verse gives us 3 important background details. 1, it's during the time of Judges, which is a dark and depressing time in Israel's history. 2, there's a famine, which means that food's going to be short throughout the story, and that's going to play in later. And 3, it's about a man, his wife, and his 2 sons going to Moab. And so then we continue on in verses 2 through 4. "The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband." So these verses are very beautifully and eloquently written, specifically the stark contrast between verse 3 saying, "Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons," and verse 5 saying, "Both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband," showing a direct contrast between how, at least when Elimelech died, she still had her sons, but now she has nobody. And then also it introduces most of the characters we'll see throughout the story by name, and names are very important throughout the story, so I went ahead and made a name key with all their Hebrew meanings. Naomi, meaning pleasant and gentle; Elimelech, meaning my God is king; Chilion, wasting away; Mahlon, sickly; Ruth, friend; and Orpah, fawn. Each of these are important to the story. Naomi, having been prior to all this tragedy in her life, was probably a very pleasant, gentle, and kind person. Elimelech raised a very godly household. Chilion and Mahlon both died very early in the story. Ruth, as we see later, is a true friend to Naomi. And Orpah, like a fawn or early young deer, strayed away and didn't know what she was doing. She was like a child, and all she knew what to do is what Naomi said. And then we continue on in verses 6 and 7 saying, "When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah." So they start this big journey that's going to take them till the end of this chapter. And they leave Moab to go to Judah because they say they have food there. And like I said before, it's during a famine, so food is a big deal. And so it's just Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah going to Judah. And they are on their way. And then we see in verses 8 through 14. "Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, 'Go back each of you to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband.' Then she kissed them goodbye. They wept aloud and said to her, 'We will go back with you to your people.' But Naomi said, 'Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons? Who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there were still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me.' At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and said goodbye, but Ruth clung to her." So Naomi gives this long speech of all the reasons why it's too late for her and there's nothing that she can do, and why Ruth and Orpah should turn back. And they try to argue in verse 10 saying, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi insists, and she says she can't have another husband, and if she did, she couldn't have kids, and if she did, they wouldn't be old enough, and all these monotonous reasons. And then we see that Orpah kisses her goodbye and leaves crying, but Ruth stays with her. And I'd like to make it very clear here that Orpah is not in the wrong. She's doing what Naomi told her to do. She doesn't know what to do. Naomi is this mother figure to her, and when Naomi says leave, the only option in her head is to leave. But Ruth stays with her and gives this beautiful reply in verses 15 through 18. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severe, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Ruth eloquently and beautifully expresses her undying devotion to Naomi, and saying that not even death can separate them now, and that, whoever Naomi stays with or wherever she stays, Ruth will follow. This is even a religious point for Ruth, saying that Naomi's God will be her God. And we already see that Naomi has doubts in her God, but Ruth is asking things of him. Like, Ruth is committed so fully to Naomi that she believes in Naomi's God more than Naomi does. And it's just so beautifully and eloquently put, her loyalty and her faithfulness to Naomi. And then we continue in verses 19 through 22 to close out the chapter. "So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, 'Can this be Naomi?' 'Don't call me Naomi,' she told them. 'Call me Mara, because of the Almighty. He has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty brought misfortune upon me.' So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning." So we see the conclusion of this journey that's taken the duration of the chapter. They finally arrive in Bethlehem, and Naomi asks that her name be changed to Mara, which is afflicted by the Lord, which shows a big difference from Naomi meaning pleasant and gentle. And this is one of many name changes throughout the Bible. We see Abraham go to Abram, Sarai to Sarah, Jacob to Israel, Saul to Paul. But this is one of the few times where the Bible does not use her changed name. Throughout the rest of the book, it never once calls her Mara. And I think that's significant because it shows that God hasn't given up on her. And even though she blames God for the misfortune in her life, God is faithful to her when she's not faithful to him. And he is still being pleasant and gentle to her. And so they arrive back in Bethlehem as the barley harvest starts, which is very important because, like I said, it's during a famine. So food is very important and central throughout the rest of the story. And that is the end of Ruth chapter 1. Some in-laws, am I right? That's all for today. See ya.